Hi, everybody. Today I want to have a conversation with you about 5 mountains that every man must conquer. 5 mountains that every man must conquer. Now, I'm talking to men particularly, but this applies to across the board. The reason why I'm very passionate about talking to men is that most men have never been in a conversation or in a place where they can be spoken to. Our culture creates a lot of content for women. There's a lot of information out there to help women in motherhood, child rearing, all that stuff. In fact, they get so much unsolicited advice. It's very difficult in our conversation to have talks with men. So I'm going to be having a conversation with a lot of men and women as well who are listening to this platform, who can share it with a man they love and they want to help. The first mountain that every man must conquer is the mountain called transitions. Moments of transitions are most often the most stressful places for men. I've realized that in between jobs, in between careers, in between changes, in between family shifts, where it was just the two of us and now there's a child on the way, that moment creates a moment of tension. And a lot of men are very vulnerable in moments where transitions are happening. Look at your life insurance adverts. Look at adverts that talk to you, for example, about life insurance, about health insurance, about your car insurance, everything. They talk to you about moments where uncertain things happen during transitions. Now, when I'm about to get married, most men begin to stress. We begin to think about, okay, so where am I going to look after this person? How is our life going to be? What kind of house are we going to stay in? What changes do I have to make? When I'm about to have a baby, those same conversations happen. Where I'm about to shift jobs or a new place of work, those kinds of conversations happen. I've realized that a lot of men are very vulnerable at moments of transitions. Most men are vulnerable at key moments of transitions. Number two, places of silence and isolation. I've realized that a lot of the struggles of men that I know that have fallen were places of isolation. And when I say isolation, I mean places where there are no interruptions in your life, right? In a moment where you are alone. And the enemy has often tried to isolate a lot of men. Very few men I know have friends, a circle of people that are around them, that support them, that enable them, that strengthen them. And most of the time, because we are alone, it is in those times and seasons when the enemy loves to fight us a lot. Now, Christ, the Bible tells us that Jesus had a habit of stepping away and being alone. And seasons of being alone are short, they are brief, they are needed. But at the same time, prolonged seasons of isolation and loneliness are dangerous for anybody. It's important that we find community. Men need community. Men need to resonate with other men. Men need to sit with other men. Men need to converse with other men. Men need to share with other men. The struggles that we have in this life require that we have moments of conversation and moments of transition. And so one of the biggest fights you'll ever have as a man is when you are alone. Look at the story of Elijah. Elijah, the minute he is threatened, scripture tells us that Jezebel says to him, listen, I'm coming for you and I'm going to get you. And the minute he is threatened and he is worried, the first thing he does is he isolates himself. He leaves his servant and he goes out into the wilderness alone to sit there. And most of the time when we are frustrated, scared, worried, stressed out, men have a chicken habit. I'll call it a chicken habit. When a chicken is sick, it finds a corner and it sits there on the corner all alone. I used to do chicken farming, and I remember one of the symptoms of a sick chicken or a dysfunctional chicken is it separates itself from the pack and it goes on its own to find a little corner to die. And I've realized that men have a habit of doing exactly the same thing. We like to isolate ourselves as soon as we feel under pressure. We don't talk when we are stressed out. We don't talk when we are alone. We don't talk when we're feeling lonely. And most men die alone, quiet. And that's another place. It's another mountain that we need to deal with. The most vulnerable man is a man that's alone. The most vulnerable man is a man that is isolated. And the most vulnerable man is the man that is in silence. Silence is good for us. It's important that we have periods and seasons of silence. I've always said to my wife that one of the most important conversations in marriage is being able to give me space. There are certain times, and I love that she understands this, where I walk away and I have a moment to myself, but I come back and I make it work again. I come back and I push again, because silence is needed, but silence should not be prolonged, particularly for men. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later. The next thing that you need to deal with, the next battle you have to fight, is the battle of key victories. Moments of victory bring elation. They make you super excited. They make you passionate. They make you feel like you are in a certain type of space. And most men that I know messed up the minute they won, messed up the minute they became a millionaire, they messed up the minute they married, they messed up the minute they got something or they achieved something. And one of the biggest things that we have to worry about is the moment where we have more than we need, the moment where we have won. In the elation of battle, in the elation of all these things, is when a lot of our character is revealed. That's why they say that a man will likely leave you when he's just made a lot of money, and a woman will likely leave you when you are broke. The revelation of that isn't in trying to shame the sexes or trying to find deficiencies within the sexes, but rather to tell you that as a man, be very cautious of the moment when you have won. Be very cautious of the minute where you have victory over the other. Be very cautious where your ego is at its peak, where your pride is at its peak, where you have had victory over everybody else, or you're no more knowledgeable than everybody else. This is a conversation I am taking out of my book, a book that I'm working on right now called Man in Perspective. And I'm talking about men and talking about the different discussions or different understandings of how men operate within where they are. And Man in Perspective is literally one of those things. Our key victories are a problem for us. And whatever is the source of your pride, the source of your joy, and whether it is your intellect, your finances, or what you have, the connections, the relational abilities that you have, all of that, be careful at moments of your key victory. The next mountain you need to be cautious with as a man is the mountain called rest. The moment called rest. And this is after you have taken all the mountains of your life. And this is after you have had victory in everything of your life and you are settled. One of the biggest dangers of the mountain called rest is actually the beast called retirement. A lot of men talk about the struggles that they have at the moment of retirement, where there is absolutely no use for them. A moment where everything in their life takes a seat and they can finally rest and there's nothing else to do. They have conquered the corporate ladder. They've conquered the relational ladder. They've conquered the ministry ladder, and they have absolutely nothing to do. One of the biggest struggles of men is to have victory over the mountain called rest. Scripture tells us that when David is supposed to be going to war, he has had victory. He's an incredible military strategist. He has done such incredible things in his time, and the whole nation knows that David is an incredible man. And at the time when kings go to war, he doesn't feel the need to go anymore. Instead, he decides he's going to stay at home and he's just going to rest because I've won already. I mean, I've already had victory. What else do I need to go and do? And as he's sitting there and is taking a walk on the rooftop of one of his on his palace, and scripture then tells us that he saw an absolutely beautiful woman bathing. Now, this woman belongs to one of his generals, but in the moment of rest and idleness, David sees that and he couldn't capitalize on the rest that he had been given by God. A man who had nothing to lose, a man who had everything he could ever want, but because he was in the moment of rest. One of the biggest dangers of our culture, especially as men, is the mountain that we need to deal with, which is the mountain of rest. That moment when I have had victory over everything. There are no longer any battles to win. Then there's nothing else left to prove. I have proved that I'm able. I've proved that I'm capable. I've proved everything to everybody. I've proved that I'm knowledgeable. And I've done everything I can. I've made money, and everybody now knows that this is the one. This guy is done. At that moment, we have to deal with that mountain called the mountain of rest. And then the last mountain that every man needs to fight is the mountain called struggle. The mountain called struggle. A lot of us we know what it's like when the chips are down, when everything that's happening in our life is currently at its lowest. And if we're talking about David, we're talking about, I think his lowest point in scripture was the cave of Adullam. It is the place where he was just a certified loser. There's no other way to put it. He was simply a loser. And everybody who knows him says, this is the guy that was anointed king of Israel. Shame, man. Sis, what is this? You know, these days prophets will just anoint anybody. These are the moments where people say, wait a minute, this guy, this is the guy, you know. And that moment where people look down on you, the moment where your car is not working and you have no income coming in, and all your friends have walked away and there doesn't seem to be any revenue coming in anywhere. The moment where people look at you and you are shamed, you are looked down on. The moment where there are trials, there are tribulations, people are defaming your name and all of that stuff. Those are the moments where most men struggle the most. That mountain is a mountain every man needs to learn to struggle to deal with. Most of us do not have the capacity to deal with our low valleys, and most of us have not been trained to handle moments where only losers come to us. We are surrounded by losers. We are surrounded by failures because we feel like a failure and we are attracting to ourselves what we are. And everybody who knows you, everybody who sees you, simply sees you as the failure that you feel that you are. That mountain is a mountain many of us have to learn to struggle with and contend with and deal with. And for men, these 5 mountains are core to defining who you are and how you're going to come out in this battle called life. I want to encourage you today to prepare yourself. One of the things that I love about Ecclesia, and I encourage you to join our Patreon as well, is we are launching what we call the School of Greatness. And in the School of Greatness, we are actually having conversations that help people address and deal with stuff like this. How do I deal with my valleys? How do I deal with my low points? How do I deal with these things that have defined my life as a failure? I've not been able to succeed. I'm stuck in a certain place. I'm not growing past a certain mountain. I hit a roadblock after one victory of my life and I make the biggest mistake, and most times, and I've noticed this, most men fail after one of these mountains. Either they were in transition, either they had just had a tremendous loss, either they had fallen, either they had just lost money, either they had just had a big victory in their life, maybe they had gone through a transition. Whatever it is that made your life the way it is, whatever it is that is making your life the way it is, you don't have to be stuck on these mountains. And part of what we do, part of what our conversations are about, are helping people deal with these 5 mountains that are in your life. Every man needs people. Every man needs community. Every man needs to learn how to have victory over transitions. Every man needs to learn to manage their moments of rest, as well as their moments of isolation, their moments of silence. But most importantly, every man needs to learn how to handle struggle. When the chips are down and nobody's gonna bet on you, how can I raise myself from this place that I'm at? And it's funny because I talk to a lot of men and they struggle. Sometimes even your wife doesn't believe in what you're building. So there are many men of God that are building churches and they're struggling to get support from their wife. Our vision is not necessarily to change people, it's to teach men to become equipped, to become empowered, to building into their life. And that's what this mission, this ministry is about. I'm honored that you spend this time with me today. God bless you.